Hey guys, welcome to lecture 3 of handout 3 in personal development. And we are going to talk about the different developmental stages. I have divided this particular handout into two categories. The first one is we're going to talk about Robert Havighurst's developmental tasks during the lifespan and Eric Erickson's psychosocial stages of development. The latter theory will basically give you an idea on how our personalities are formed. And this is just one among all or among many theories in psychology that talks about personality. Robert Havighurst has came up with this developmental task theory wherein he said that development is a continuous process throughout the entire lifespan. Okay? Occurring in stages, the individual moves from one stage to the next by means of successful resolution of problems or performance of developmental tasks. Meaning, in order for the individual to go from one stage to another, he or she must be able to overcome or successfully gain the task that is expected during that particular stage. Now, he also identified the biopsychosocial model of development. It's a combination of three concepts. The first one is the biological or the biology of the individual, the psychological, and the sociological. So the biological involves the physiological maturation and genetic makeup of the individual. So anything that has to do with the body of a person, the intellect, that's the biology part. Next is psychological. It involves the personal values and goals, even motivation. What drives the person in becoming a fully self-actualized individual. And the third one is the sociology, which is very specific to the culture to which the individual belongs to. In handout 2, we also discuss the personal assets that facilitate positive youth development. So pinag-usapan natin doon yung intellectual development, psychological, and social development. So it's actually similar with this one. Alright, so let's go directly to Robert Havighurst's developmental task during the lifespan. And the first stage is what we call the babyhood and early childhood, which is from birth to 6 years old. So madali lang natin itong intindihin. Up until 6 years old, kailangan matuto na yung bata in terms of learning how to take solid foods, paano maglakad, learning how to walk and run, learning how to talk, diba? The shift becomes from baba, mama, dada in babyhood to being able to say complete sentences by the age of 6 years old. Learning to control the elimination of body waste. Malaking bagay yan sa mga bata. They have this sense of achievement kapag nakaihi sila sa inodoro, diba? Sa toilet mismo, or hindi na sila nangangailangan ng diaper kapag matutulog sa gabi. So, the resolution for this particular stage requires some sort of independence with regards to their body. Also, at this stage, they get to learn the differences between sex and as well as sexual modesty. Okay. Pansinin ninyo, ano ba ang nilalaro ng mga bata at this point? Diba? Pag babae, anong usual na binibigay ng mga magulang? Lutu-lutuan, dolls, ano pa ba? Basta anything that is dainty and feminine, ibinibigay sa mga batang babae. While sa mga lalaki naman, diba, anong nilalaro nila? Baril-barilan, robot, kotse. So somehow, doon nakikita or napapansin ng bata na meron din palang pagkakaiba ang babae at saka lalaki. Of course, kasama dito rin yung sexual modesty. Diba? Nandiyan yung lalabas sila ng CR na nakahubad pero magko-cover sila ng pototoy nila, ng body parts nila, kunwari may hiya-hiya. Diba? Next, we also have, at this point wherein this child gets ready to read, learning 3 syllables or 3-letter words, di ba? Matatandaan pa ninyo the CVC, consonant, vowel, consonant. So, doon nagsisimula yung development of reading ng mga bata. Learning to distinguish right and wrong, di ba? Kahit bata pa yan, even that is around 1 or up until 6 years old, they get to identify what is right and what is wrong. For example, asking for food. Diba? Kailangan may po at opo. Also, this includes the beginning to develop a conscience. So, at the latter part of this stage, lumalabas na yung guilt feelings nila. So at this stage, nade-develop na yung kanilang conscience. So the second stage of development is what we call the late childhood. It's between 6 to 10 years old or 12 years old. Okay? The first one is learning physical skills necessary for ordinary games. So at this point, the child should be adept in using his body. For example, like walking, running, catching ball, diba? Ito yung mga skills na dapat alam natin kapag bata tayo dahil kaya nating maglaro. Jumping high, diba? Sa kunwari magta-10-20 or Chinese garter, playing the jackstone. Naabutan niyo pa ba ang jackstone? Hopefully, nalaro pa ninyo yun. The second one is building a wholesome attitude towards oneself as a growing organism. Basically, a wholesome attitude, learning how to love yourself, accept oneself. Next is learning to get along with age mates. So, at this point, kailangan marunong na yung bata makihalubilo. Or at the very least, learn how to play with their age mates. Also, this is the time wherein you develop appropriate masculine or feminine social roles. So, itinuturo na sa eskwelahan kung ano ba ang ginagawa ng babae, anong ginagawa ng lalaki, the differences between gender, and the roles they play in a person's life. Also, dito rin nagsisimula yung developing fundamental skills in reading, writing, and calculating. So, this is the elementary age years. Sisimula na kayong magbilang, mag-addition, subtraction, all those basic mathematical skills. Next is developing concepts necessary for everyday life or everyday living, like being able to talk to an older person, yung pagtawid sa kalsada, pagbili ng mga kailangan, pupunta ka sa sari-sari store, yung magbilang ka ng sukli mo. Ayan. Those are examples of concepts that is necessary for you to navigate your everyday living. We also have what we call developing a conscience, a sense of morality, and a scale of values. Miss, anong pagkakaiba niya? Nag-jump ako, no? So, Miss, anong pagkakaiba nito ng developing the concepts necessary for, developing a conscience, a sense of morality, and a scale of values doon sa this learning to distinguish right and wrong sa babyhood? Take note of the operative words learning and developing. Sa learning, unti-unti pa lang na-i-introduce yung konsepto ng tama at mali. Sa developing, nandoon na yung proseso ng it's not just the identification of what is right and wrong, pero the comprehension behind it, the understanding in making sure that they make correct decisions. Okay? Next is developing attitudes towards social groups and institutions. So, nakaka-relate na sila sa mga grupo na ito. For example, the church, and even the school where they are studying. Somehow they get to identify with these particular groups. And the last one is, of course, achieving personal independence. So hopefully, by grade 6, uh, bago tumuntong ng high school ang bata, somehow they already have this sense of independence, na they do not have to um, always resort to looking for their moms or dads or an adult for guidance. The third stage of development is what we call the adolescence. It's between 12 to 18 years old. So, somehow, dito papasok ang inyong mga edad. So, what needs to develop here is that you need to achieve a new and more mature relations with age mates of both sexes. So, kung dun sa late childhood, ang konsepto ninyo ng kaibigan ay girls and boys, pag may laban, it's always girls versus boys. But during the adolescence, you get to realize na relationship across all sexes could also merge. Meaning, pwede mong maging kaibigan ang mga lalaki and vice versa. Okay? Also, at this point, you should be achieving a masculine and feminine social role. So, you already get to identify na, ako ay isang babae, dapat ganito ang gawin ko, ganito ang mga actions ko, ganito dapat ang behavior ko. The same with being a male or a masculine, diba? I have to be a gentleman. I have to give way to women or older people. So that's an example of a social role. Next, we have what we call the accepting one's physique and using one's body effectively. So, kailangan, nandito na yung punto na unti-unti mo nang tinatanggap kung ano yung itsura mo, yung pagkatao mo, and then you're able to use it effectively. Desiring, accepting, and achieving socially responsible behavior. Also, achieving emotional independence from parents and other adults. Hindi yung nasaktan ka ng kaibigan mo, uuwi ka ng bahay, tapos iiyakan mo yung nanay mo kasi inaway ka ng friend mo. Diba? Nandun na kayo sa edad that you are already trying to establish your independence. And kasabay nun, yung emotional independence din. Also, this is the time wherein you are preparing for an economic career. Miss, bakit po preparing? Primarily because, for example, you are in senior high school. Diba? Kaya kayo napunta sa strand na kinalalagyan ninyo because you already have an idea of what you want as a career later on in life. So, nagsisimula pa lang kayong mag-prepare. And when you say prepare, studying on what you want to do. Next is what we call preparing for marriage and family life. Miss, bakit may pinag-uusapan tayong kasalan dyan? Take note of the operative word preparing. So, nasa trial and error pa lang kayo. That's why during this stage, most of you have this urge to have a relationship. Magkaroon ka na ako ng boyfriend or ng girlfriend. And somehow, the experiences you have with this kind of relationship will prepare you to what will happen in the future once you get married, once you have your own family. And the last one is acquiring a set of values and an ethical system as a guide to behavior developing ideologies. So, this also involves you identifying ano ba yung importante para sa'yo. Okay? For example, I've been telling you all of this about my favorite quotation, which is, if you could be anything in this world, be kind. And that's the values that is very important for me. And doon umiikot yung lahat ng ginagawa ko. Okay? So, at this point, during the adolescent years, kailangan meron na rin kayong set of values na pinapahalagahan at pinapangalagaan. The fourth developmental stage is the early adulthood. It's between 18 to 40 years old. So this is the time wherein you're starting to get an occupation. Okay? After graduation, your first job, okay, identifying the skill set necessary for you to be successful in that work. Next is selecting a mate. Okay, so early adulthood yan, from 18 years old to 40 years old. Sinong magiging girlfriend mo or boyfriend mo, who will be your lifetime partner. At this stage, you're also learning how to love with a marriage partner. You get to realize that love is not just all butterflies, flowers, and all those roses or sunflowers. Nakikita mo rin or maiintindihan mo rin na pag sinabing marriage, it requires a lot of work. And not just all those positive things na nasabi ko earlier. Okay? This is also the time wherein you're starting to build your own family. Also, rearing children. Paano ka pagpapalaki, kumbaga, ng mga bata. Managing a home. How are you going to manage your finances? Yung tinatawag natin ngayon na adulting. Not just focusing on your needs, but the needs of your family as well. Also, taking on civic responsibility. Minsan, may ibig sabihin ng civic responsibility. So, ito yung boboto ka na, diba? Being responsible on who you are going to vote for. That's gonna lead the country. Importante yan. So, kung kayo ay magiging 18 na by 2022, please vote or please register so that you could vote by that time. At mamili tayo ng deserving talaga ng mga politiko na magbibigay serbisyo sa bayan. And of course, the last one is finding a congenial social group. Ito yung core group na sinasabi natin. Usually, ito yung tropa na kilala natin. Most of the time, it starts from high school. Example ng congenial social group will be your kumare, kumpare, mga ninong-ninang ng magiging anak ninyo. That's a congenial social group. Even your colleagues when you're already working, that's a congenial social group. So the fifth developmental stage is the middle age. It's between 40 to 60 years old. So most of the time, siguro karamihan sa inyo, nandito na yung edad ng mga magulang ninyo. Okay? So the first one is achieving adult civic and social responsibility. It could mean a lot of things, but usually it involves you defending the Constitution, yung pagiging mamamayan ninyo bilang pagiging Pilipino, yung responsibility ninyo to be part of a democratic process. In our case, is voting, diba? Yung pagiging responsible ninyo in identifying or magluklok ng karapat-dapat na politiko na magsisilbi sa bayan. Also, it's an example will be you being able to participate in the local community. Volunteerism is also a part of your civic responsibility. Next is assisting teenage children to become responsible and happy adults. So, ayan, nakikita ninyo, di ba? Ang daming issues ng edad ninyo, ng generation ninyo. And hopefully, you have parents at home who will guide you along the way and really support you as you encounter a lot of changes in your life. Next is reaching and maintaining satisfactory performance in one's occupational career. So most of the time, talaga pagdating sa edad na to, stable na, financially stable na dapat ang tao. Kung hindi man siya financially stable, at least they are trying to work towards achieving that stability. Also, it involves adjusting to aging parents. So kapag nakikita rin ninyo dito na at this point sa middle age, ang mga magulang nila nandoon na sa old age, mga lolo't lola na, mga retired employees already, and they have so much time at home. So ang nangyayari, nagkakaroon din ng adjustment ang dalawang panig na ito. Okay? Next is, of course, relating oneself to one's spouse as a person. So, you get to see your husband or your wife as a partner and not just yung kasama, kumbaga, sa buhay. And the last one is, of course, accepting and adjusting to the physiological changes of middle age. Nandiyan yung hindi ka na kasing agile kaysa nung bata ka. Okay? Onting yung kulang, may sumasakit na sa katawan. Pagdating ng gabi, umaaray ka na kasi may lamig yung likod mo. Yan. So, kailangan din natin mag-adjust because of the idea that our body is also growing. And the last stage is old age. It's between 60 to death. So, the first thing that's really occurring there is that you need to adjust to the decreasing physical strength and health. You're not as young as you were. Itong mga lolo't lola natin. For example, my dad is always a tennis player. And the last stage is old age. It's between 60 to death. So these are the changes that would occur at this point. First is adjusting to decreasing physical strength and health. For example, when my dad was around 50 to 60 years old during the middle age, he could play tennis for 2 to 3 hours. Okay? Talagang lalaban siya at hahabulin niya ang bola. But now, I notice, now that he is 65 years old, when he plays tennis, bumabagal na rin yung movement niya. Minsan, nakatayo na lang siya. Tapos, kung pumalo siya ng raketa, ng bola, yung bangga-bangga na lang ang tawag nila doon. So, they get to identify na they are not as agile as before. Similar to when you are in the middle age. The second one is adjusting to retirement and reduce income. So, bago mag-retire, they could be earning as much as 60 to 80,000. Pero the moment na mag-retire sila, syempre hindi na nagtatrabaho, hindi na sila sumisweldo ng naaayon or ng katulad nung nagtatrabaho pa sila. Syempre, they also need to adjust to that. Even yung work. Okay? So kung dati 8 to 5, from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. nagtatrabaho sila, and then nung nag-retire, literally, halos wala na silang ginagawa. So they need to adjust and look for ways on how time will pass. The third one is adjusting to death of spouse. Yan. So normal din naman talaga na sa panahon na ito, malapit ka nang mamatay. Or hindi mo sa malapit ka nang mamatay. Pero death is actually imminent. Next is establishing an explicit affiliation with members of one's age group. So for example, my dad, dahil hindi na nga siya nagtatrabaho, lolo na, old age na, ang nakakasama niya is, of course, the family, pero kasama rin doon yung tennis group niya. Okay? So meron siyang MWF and Sunday para maglaro ng tennis, and other than that, makikipagtsikahan siya doon. Okay? May samahan, kumbaga, na nabubuo when they are able to find a common interest. And the last one is what we call establishing satisfactory physical and living arrangements. So saan ba titira si lolo at si lola? Titira ba siya doon sa bunsong anak? Or meron bang pamilya na sasama sa kanila doon sa bahay nila? Yun. So, these developmental stages are really important so that we get to make sure that consistent pa rin or at par pa rin yung development natin doon sa what is expected from us.